Well, today is Wednesday, the 27th of December of the year 2023. It is 9:08 in the morning, and I am here to address a fact that I have been refusing to acknowledge for many years now, and it's only just come into my head to basically express outright here in a video. And that is that many years I thought that there was no writer in this known world who could surpass Arthur Conan Doyle. And his book, The Lost World, it's still my favorite, will remain my favorite probably until the end of my days. And I just think it's the most perfectly written thing. But the reality of the situation is there are better writers than him, far better writers actually, in terms of wordplay, in terms of characterization, and also really in terms of just certain turns of phrase that just give you a sort of glimpse into a broader depth into these characters that these people write about. And that really makes it look as though Conan Doyle is sort of children's fare. In fact, Lovecraft, though I very much admire him, I disagreed with this statement initially when he said in his essay, Supernatural Horror in Literature, he said, Conan Doyle is a good writer for young people. Well, after having read some of these writers, I can somewhat agree with him in that regard. Because once I talk about many of these writers here, I'll be able to justify that claim, hopefully, and maybe even convince you people to check these folks out if you haven't already. But I have three writers in particular that I want to discuss, and two of them are American, one is English, and I suppose I'll get into the list. So, the first writer whom is manifestly better than Arthur Conan Doyle is one whom I've read before. Actually, I've had read to me in the evenings when I was very young in the bath. Mother would read me various books and things. That's pretty much how I got all my reading done when I wasn't forced to. I preferred to be read to, have someone do the reading than do it myself. And, she'd read me Beatrix Potter and the Peter Rabbit books and various other things too. But there was a book by one author that she read which really did stick with me, and I have not read it since. It was an abridgment from Children's Illustrated Classics, but I plan to read it soon. I got the unabridged text, and that book is Call of the Wild, and the writer I'm going to be discussing right now is Jack London. Jack London, back when I was sort of just getting into literature almost 10 years ago now, is a writer I sort of slept on. I was more interested in a lot of these writers who were published in periodicals, like H.G. Wells and obviously Conan Doyle and various other things like that. Mark Twain even. And I just sort of assumed that really he just wrote strictly about wolves and cold weather. And I thought, we've read that before and probably is not worth considering at all. I kept hearing about him, though, from various sources, chiefly Dan Schneider on Cosmoetica, not the other Dan Schneider, who I doubt has ever even read London. But nevertheless, and basically it was said that generally he was one of these writers who is considered to be great and is worth reading. And I had only known him from Call of the Wild. I believe I was also Red, White Fang, but I don't remember. And the more I kept hearing about him, the more he seemed really to be almost the American equivalent of Arthur Conan Doyle, because this is a man who wrote and had a fantastic range, wrote various books in various different genres, but was primarily known for one type by which he was typified, which is the ones about the Klondike and cold weather and all that. But this man, the first book that I read by him this year, I just discovered this man this year, was Before Adam, which is basically a narrative told by a man who I suppose reckons he lived a second life or a past life as a hominid in the early Pleistocene or the mid-Pleistocene, one of them. And the fact that he wrote about a caveman and such and told it from his point of view shows you that this man has a tremendous imagination. There's another book he wrote called The Abysmal Brute, which is a boxing story. I haven't read very many boxing stories. I've read The Bully of Brocker's Court by Arthur Conan Doyle, but not really anything else. And I very much like this one indeed. And then he wrote The Scarlet Plague, which is about a plague that kills off 99% of the world's population. And an old man telling his grandchildren this story in the distant future, and basically how they need to spread knowledge and such and all that, and they think him just mad and raving and don't really listen to him. It's a devastating ending. And of course he wrote Martin Eden, which is a book about a sailor who basically comes ashore and wishes to be a writer to impress this woman that he's taken with. And basically sort of his integration into high society and all that. A very interesting book indeed. And so not only is it the terrific range that attracted me to London, but the fact that, okay, so mostly Conan Doyle sort of mined his imagination for his works and such. I have not read Memories and Reflections, his autobiography, but so far as I'm concerned, not much really in his work is strictly autobiographical. Most of it is based in the imagination, and it's just the conception of his mind. London, on the other hand, basically lived a very adventurous life. Well, actually, Conan Doyle, he did too. He was obviously a doctor and such, and sailed a ship to Africa and various other things too. But this man basically imbued all of his works with everything he did and saw. And you can tell on the page that this man really does know what he's talking about. And it's just phenomenal. It actually, in my estimation, could be a whole other video unto itself, but really imaginative writing and writing based from experience, there's no comparison. The latter is obviously better because not only do you know what you're talking about, but the fact that that sort of thing can only come from real experience. In fact, Arthur Conan Doyle said this once: life is infinitely more strange than anything that the mind of man could invent. That just goes to show you. He is one writer who is better than Conan Doyle, and I recommend him highly. Another way in which London is very similar to Conan Doyle is that he writes in a very concise, straightforward writing style, sort of like H.G. Wells's philosophy of writing straight. But one thing that fascinated me about him is that he'd write in, sort of like almost in a timeless way to where it have been written at any time. But every few pages, he just throws a word at you that you've never heard of before. And basically, by that, you can increase your vocabulary. Conan Doyle is sort of like that in a way, but most of his words are typically known. It's just that, they're reminders of things that you may have learned in the past, but don't know now, so it's good to know them. London, these words I've never heard of before, and really the fact that he is increasing my vocabulary and making me smarter as a writer also makes him better in my eyes than Conan Doyle. So that's Jack London. Second writer, I had read before and thought really that he was largely impenetrable. He wrote various books in the Victorian age, and most of them were quite long and such, and I was led to believe that they were written in a very difficult to understand style, and that really only his most famous work, which is a very slim tome, was not worth reading, but let's just say really the easiest thing to get into. And I used to make a habit of reading that particular book every year around this time, but I'd since fallen out of it, and I've recently gotten back into it. And the writer who I'm speaking of now is fairly famous. It's Charles Dickens, and the book obviously is A Christmas Carol. Oh my goodness, Dickens. Okay, so what can I say about this man? I had forgotten, basically, just how much I love Dickens' sense of wordplay, his characterization, and also really just his general sense of humor in his works. And even so thin a volume as A Christmas Carol is, it's just expertly done and seems to come out of him without much apparent effort. Conan Doyle's good with characters too, but Dickens has a leg up on him in that the whole "you seem more gravy than grave to me" thing in that department. Conan Doyle is, I suppose, more of a workman instead of an artist that Dickens is, even though really they're very similar writers. They were both published in periodicals and wrote primarily for a larger reading audience, though they indeed were capable of producing works that were just thoroughly impressive. Dickens is on another level, as I said, and I will easily be reading more of him in the foreseeable future. I have my eyes set on Hard Times, because I figure I may as well. I have the whole Oxford Illustrated Dickens that I've had for several years, and I haven't really gotten into. I've just kept it because, well, this is probably the best set of Dickens I could ever hope to get, and I may as well have it. But I figured I'd start with the shortest ones and work my way up to the longer ones, and we'll see how we go. But if any of you have not read Charles Dickens, and I've only just read Christmas Carol, and I think some of Tale of Two Cities, though it's been many years, do indeed consider doing so. Now, the third writer, I didn't even have to read an entire work by him to determine that he is by far makes Conan Doyle look like Pulp Fiction. No offense, but he does. And he's sort of not as well known as you'd think he'd be. And he's a bit underrated in that respect. He's sort of known for really only one book, but he wrote quite a few, even though he lived a very short life and he died tragically at the age of 28. And he was actually also an influence, evidently, on Conan Doyle. Their writing is very similar in a sense, though I think that this man's writing is in every way superior to the man he influenced. And the writer I'm going to be talking about, I can't talk much about him because really I've only just happened upon the stray paragraph, is Stephen Crane. This man wrote The Red Badge of Courage, Maggie, A Girl of the Streets, The Monster, The Open Boat, various other tales and such and all that. But this writing seems to come from another world, in that every sentence, it seems, is replete with meaning, and that it would take, no offense, but it would take Conan Doyle 10 lifetimes to come up with things that are on the same level as this. Red Badge of Courage, for example, I will certainly get to reading that here soon, but when I was leafing through that, I was struck with just how powerful these sentences were, and I had to sit back for a minute and say, I think I may need to reconsider how I go about writing after reading that. I am just in awe of this man, and I will certainly make it a point to read everything he's written. And that is also the case with these three writers that I've just discussed. And I thought it wasn't possible, but evidently it is. There are better writers than the ones that you think are your favorites. And I just proved that here. These people are on another level, separate from Conan Doyle, and I still very much like him a lot. He's probably still at least my favorite, but these people impressed me much more than he did. And I hope that you consider reading these folks and giving me your thoughts and opinions if you've already read them. I'm not sure, but nevertheless, I thank you very much for watching. I will see you here, I'm not sure when, certainly before the end of this year, maybe on Sunday, I don't know, but Probably not very much in the new year because I have so much stuff on my plate. It's ridiculous. I won't be back probably until like maybe April or even July, or hell, I may not even be on the website at all in 2024. I don't know. But nevertheless, hope you enjoyed, and I wish you a very good morning, midday, afternoon, evening, midnight, whenever you happen to see this, and we will see you here soon enough. Cheers.